Hello and welcome to our channel Qubit Educational Services. In this video we are going to solve the engineering mathematics section of the GATE XE paper year 2016. Let us start with our first question. Question number 1. A company records heights of all employees. Let X and Y denote the errors in the average height of male and female employees respectively. So X and Y aren't the heights themselves, but X and Y are the random variables denoting the errors in the average height. Okay. Assume that X is normally distributed with mean 0 and variance 4, and Y is normally distributed with mean 0 and variance 9, and they are independent. Okay, now this particular part of the problem is important because it is going to simplify a lot of things. They are independent. Then the distribution of Z, okay, another random variable given by X plus Y upon 2 is, okay, and we have 4 options. All of them are normal distributions with 0 mean but different values of variance. Okay, so we start solving this problem by first writing down the given data. The random variable X, which denotes the error in the average height of males, okay, is normally distributed with mean 0 and variance 4. Okay, so mu x and sigma x squared are the standard notations that we are going to use. And the second one is Y, which is the error in the average height of female employees, okay, which is normally distributed with same mean as that of X but with a different value of variance, that is 9. Okay, now comes the main part. Okay, they are independent. Okay, and we do have a ready-made formula for finding the mean and the variance of a linear combination of independent normal distributions. Okay, specifically, suppose we have n such independent normally distributed random variables, then if we are considering linear combination of them where alphas are all scalars, then this is a new random variable. Let us call it x prime, okay, or x star, and the mean of this is given by just adding the means of individual variables. Okay, and the variance is given by alpha j squared into sigma j squared. Okay, now we're going to make use of these two formulas to solve the problem. Observe that the variable z's definition fits that of the linear combination. Okay, so we can write z as 1 upon 2 times x plus 1 upon 2 times y. So in our usual notations, alpha 1 is half and so is alpha 2. Okay, so this is again a normally distributed random variable as per our property. Okay, and how are we going to calculate its mean? To calculate the mean, use the same scalars alphas, okay, and take the linear combination of the associated means. Okay, now both mu j's here, mu1 and mu2, are 0. Okay, so 1 upon 2 times 0, so this is alpha 1 times mu1 plus 1 upon 2 into 0, so plus alpha 2 times mu2. Okay, and as we expected, this has to be 0. Now let us calculate the variance. Okay, to calculate the variance, what we do is we actually take the squares of the coefficients, okay, alpha 1 and alpha 2 as per the property. So square of alpha 1 is 1 upon 4 and square of alpha 2 is again 1 upon 4, because essentially both alpha 1 and alpha 2 are same because of this 2 in the denominator. Okay, and we just take the linear combination of the variance with the squares of alphas. So the new variable z will have variance equal to 1 upon 4 into variance of the first, which is 4, plus 1 upon 4 into variance of the second, which is 9. Yes. So z is a normally distributed random variable with mean 0 and variance given by 1 plus 9 upon 4, right? Which is 13 upon 4. If you calculate the decimal equivalent of this, it is going to be 3.25. Hence option B. Okay, so a very simple question, but based on this formula which you should know in order to solve the problem during gate. Otherwise it will take you a lot of time to prove them. Okay, fine. So that is question 1 based on probability. Let's go to question 2 based on calculus of single variable functions. The volume of the solid obtained by revolving the curve y squared equal to x, where x lies between 0 and 1 around y-axis. Okay, now usually when we study the volumes of solids of revolution, usually the revolution axis is the x-axis, but here they are asking us to calculate the volume when the curve is revolved around y-axis. Okay, so first let us draw the curve, which I have already done here. It is going to be this parabola, even powers of y, so symmetric about x-axis. Okay, x is lying between 0 and 1, so we should consider only this particular section of the curve. So this point is going to be 1 comma minus 1. Okay, now this curve is being revolved around y-axis, so the volumes or the volumes formula that we should take will have limits on y as -1 to +1. Yes. Okay, lower limit -1, upper limit 1. Okay, then the formula is pi x squared dy, because we actually consider the elementary volumes. Okay, elementary cylinders or elementary discs, if you want to call them. Okay, so it is pi x squared dy. If it had been volume around x-axis, then the formula is integral a to b pi y squared dx. Okay, which matches with the formula pi r squared h dimensionally. Okay, all right. Now what is x squared as far as our curve is concerned? X squared is y to the power 4. Yes. Okay, so it will be pi times integral of y to the power 4 with respect to y with limits -1 to 1. Okay, now if you find this volume, it will turn out to be 2 pi by 5. Okay, because this is an even function, so if its integral will be 2 times the integral of 0 to 1. Okay, but in the options they have not given 2 pi by 5, so it looks like they want us to revolve only this particular surface or this particular curve. Okay, let me use black color now, this one, the one that lies above the x-axis. So if you do it, then you will get the answer pi by 5, so option D. Okay, a very simple question, but you should not get confused. If you get the answer as 2 pi by 5, you should immediately change the curve of revolution. Okay, the curve that you are going to revolve as that portion of the parabola which lies above the x-axis. Okay, next is question 3 based on ordinary differential equations of first order. Let y of x be the solution of the initial value problem dy by dx plus 2xy equal to x, and when x is 0, y is 0. Find the value of the limit of this solution as x tends to infinity. Okay, not very difficult to recognize that this is a linear differential equation of first order and whose general form is dy by dx plus py equal to q. All of us know that. So p is going to be 2x, the coefficient of y, and q is going to be the right hand side, okay, which is x. The general solution is y into e to the power integral p dx equal to integral of q into e to the power integral p dx plus the constant of integration c. Now, because p being 2x, you can actually integrate this, so it will be y into e to the power x squared. Okay, very simple. Now let us go to the integral on the right hand side. It is going to be integral of x into e to the power x squared. Yes, now we can use the integration by substitution method by multiplying and dividing by 2. Okay, so if you take it and write it like this, you can actually substitute x squared as t or whichever variable you want. 2x dx will become dt, and this will simply be integral of e to the power t. Okay, so the right hand side is going to be 1 upon 2 into e to the power x squared plus the constant of integration c. Okay, now we need to find the limit of y. Okay, so first let us divide everything by e to the power x squared. So we are now going to get this. Now, although this is the general solution, okay, we can actually find the answer without using the initial condition. Okay, y of 0 is 0. Okay, just take the limit of this. Okay, if you take the limit of this particular function, okay, no matter what c is, because of the decreasing nature of this function, and although it is going to be always positive, we know that the limit of this function as x tends to infinity, it's 0. And therefore limit of y as x tends to infinity is going to be 1 upon 2 plus 0, which is 0.5. Okay, so this being a numerical answer type question, you should type the exact value, that is 0.5. Okay, because the answer is a rational number and which has a terminating decimal expansion. So this is question 3, pretty simple. Let's go to 4th. Now this topic, this question is based on the topic partial differential equations. We are not going to solve any differential equation in this question, but this question is testing whether you have understood the terms associated with PDEs. Okay, which of the following is a quasi-linear partial differential equation? Okay, and we have 4 options. Now to solve this problem, you should first know what a quasi-linear partial differential equation is. Okay, we already know what a linear differential equation is. Okay, so any quasi-linear differential equation, in particular partial differential equation, is such a differential equation which is linear with respect to the highest order derivatives, meaning you shouldn't have any power of the highest order derivatives apart from 1, okay, or 0, and secondly, 2 highest order derivatives should not occur in the same term. Okay, so the explanation is here. Their coefficients can be functions of lower order derivatives, and secondly, the terms with lower order can appear in any manner. Okay, so this is important. If we were to define a strictly linear partial differential equation, then we could not allow the coefficients to be lower order partial derivatives, right? We can allow them to be functions of the independent variables or constants, right? So in a quasi-linear partial differential equation, the coefficients are functions of lower order derivatives. See, not only that, okay, these terms with lower order, they can appear in any manner. Okay, so you can have root of any such derivative, you can have a fractional power or a negative power and so on. Okay, now let us start checking which one of them is a quasi-linear partial differential equation, starting with option 1. Okay, now what is the coefficient of d2u by dt squared? It is 1. Okay, so that's fine. Now if you go to the second term, due to the second power of u, we cannot definitely call it a linear partial differential equation, but this is definitely a quasi-linear. Why? Because as far as the highest order derivative is concerned, it is linear. Okay, the other terms can appear in any manner. So the option A fits our definition, so it is option A. Now let us argue why B, C and D are not quasi-linear. Okay, let's go to B. In B, what we have is dabba u by dabba t squared plus dabba u by dabba x equal to 0. Okay, now what is the highest order derivative here? There are two of them, both are of first order. And because as per the definition, it has to be linear with respect to the highest order derivative, we cannot have second power here. And because the second power is present here, this is not the differential equation that we are looking for. Okay, let's argue now regarding C. Okay, see, now again for C we can make the same arguments. Okay, both dabba u by dabba t and dabba u by dabba x are of second power. Right, and if we have a linear differential equation, then we cannot have even a single partial derivative with second or higher powers. Okay, so C is also not going to be quasi-linear. Let's go to D. Now clearly D is also not a quasi-linear partial differential equation because the highest order derivatives actually possess powers, right? Dabba u by dabba d raised to 4 and dabba u by dabba x to the power 3. So it is not linear with respect to the highest order derivatives. So D is also not right. Okay, see, now once you recognize which one of them is quasi-linear, you can actually stop checking the other options and go to the next question. Okay, but I thought I should explain you why are others not quasi-linear. Okay, so question 4 on PD is, let's go to fifth. Now fifth is a common sense question, but nonetheless let's solve it. Let P of x and Q of x be polynomials of degree 5, okay, which are generated by Lagrange and Newton interpolation methods respectively. Okay, both passing through 6 given distinct points on the xy plane. 6 given distinct points. Okay, which one of the following is correct? Now before we read the options, we would like to make one observation. Okay, both P of x and Q of x are polynomials of degree 5. Yes, so degree 5 means there will be 6 coefficients. Okay, one coefficient each corresponding to the power of x, okay, or the variable x, first, second, third till fifth, and the last one is going to be the constant. Okay, so 6 coefficients. And how many distinct points do we have, or how many xy pairs do we have? 6. Okay, and we know that if we have an nth degree polynomial, okay, which passes through n plus 1 points, 6, such a polynomial is always unique. Okay, so there cannot be two distinct polynomials of degree 5 passing through given 6 distinct points. Okay, which means the correct statement is P of x and Q of x are identical. So option A. Okay, B, C and D are again incorrect because they're saying polynomial of degree 1, degree 2, degree 3. Okay, everything there is false. Okay, so due to the uniqueness of the polynomials of the same degree passing through the same n plus 1 points, answer to question 5 is option A. Okay, now you can consider this question from the section numerical methods, although you can solve it by using the properties of polynomials. Question 6 is based on differential or in general calculus of complex variable functions. This is based on the Laurent series. The Laurent series of the function f of z, which is given by 1 over z cubed minus z to the power 4, centered at z equal to 0 obviously, in the region mod of z greater than 1 is. Okay, now we know that for the same function we can have different Laurent series depending on the region, okay, due to the convergence criterion. Okay, now there are four options, but nonetheless we have to start by writing down f of z, and due to the form of f of z we will bring in the geometric series. Okay, so first let us start by writing down the definition, or by writing down the function, which is 1 over z cubed minus z to the power 4. Okay, first thing that I have done is I have taken z cubed common from both the terms. Okay, so it is going to be 1 over z cube into 1 upon 1 minus z. Now we will be happy, or we would have been happy to consider this particular term and write it as 1 plus z squared plus z cubed and so on. Okay, only when the absolute value of z is less than 1. Okay, all of you might now remember this. Okay, so this is the geometric series which converges to 1 upon 1 minus z only if mod of z is less than 1. Okay, but this is not the region that we are looking for. We are looking for the region mod of z greater than 1. Okay, which means taking 1 upon z cubed common has not helped us much because of the region of convergence. Okay, so what we'll do is we will now try to rearrange the term 1 upon 1 minus z by taking one more z common. Okay, so if we take z common from 1, it will become 1 upon z and z will become 1. Okay, and now is the time that we can start thinking of geometric series once again. Okay, first combine z cubed and z, and that will give you z to the power 4. Okay, now in order to write the bracket in terms of 1 upon 1 minus something, take the negative sign common and put it here. Okay, so it will now become 1 upon 1 minus 1 upon z. Now this particular infinite, okay, the geometric series associated with this, okay, is now 1 plus 1 over z plus 1 over z squared plus 1 over z cubed and so on. Yes, because now we don't have z there, we have 1 upon z. Okay, so this 1 upon z is actually the common ratio. Okay, and what is the convergence criterion for this? Mod of 1 upon z should be less than 1. And is it what we have here? Yes, if mod of z is greater than 1, the reciprocal of mod of z has to be less than 1. Okay, so this is what matches with the given region. So let us now use this geometric series expansion. Okay, so it is negative 1 upon z to the power 4 into 1 plus 1 upon z plus 1 upon z squared and so on. Okay, now we need to pick the correct one. Apparently only option B has the negative sign. Okay, so it's most likely to be correct. Let us see if it matches. If we let n to be 0, then the first term is going to be 1 upon z to the power 4. Yes. Second term is going to be 1 upon z to the power 5. Yes. Okay, and so on. So it is option B. Had we not recognized the region of convergence correctly, we may have ended up selecting an incorrect option. Okay, all right, see specifically what would that be? What would the Laurent series of this function be if well, in the region mod of z less than 1, we are required to multiply this by 1 upon z cubed, right? So it will be 1 upon z cubed plus 1 upon z squared and so on. Okay, so it would have been option A. For mod of z less than 1, would have been option A. Okay, 1 upon z cubed means the first term is z to the power minus 3. Okay, but you shouldn't choose A as the right option due to the convergence criteria. Okay, and see, now you will understand that the very reason that option A exists before option B, or the series there, is because students tend to ignore the fact that geometric series has a radius of convergence. Okay, but nonetheless we have now correctly identified it, and the correct option is B and not A. Okay, next is question 7. Based on vector integral calculus, the value of the surface integral f bar dot n cap ds over the sphere gamma, which is a unit sphere centered at origin, where f bar is 4x I cap minus z k cap, and n denotes the outward unit normalist. Okay, now this is a standard problem on the divergence theorem. Okay, so because the surface integral is asked, we'll try to find it with the help of the divergence theorem. That is, we will evaluate the triple integral of divergence of f bar taken over the, well, taken throughout the sphere, interior of the sphere gamma. Okay, so what is the divergence of f? It is going to be 4 plus 0 minus 1. Okay, so 3. Del dot f bar is 3. Okay, you know the definition. Now taking 3 outside, it is going to be triple integral of 1 dv, which is essentially volume. Okay, so 3 times volume of the sphere whose radius is 1. So 4 pi by 3 into radius cube, 3 will get cancelled. So the final answer is 4 pi, option D. Okay, very simple question. But the only thing is, you should know what divergence theorem is first, and secondly, how to find the divergence. Okay, yes, that is question 7. And usually most of the questions that come in GATE based on the vector integral calculus usually involve divergence theorem and volume. Okay, so that is question 7. Let's go to a question on probability now. Now this is a 2-mark questions. All questions numbered from 8 to 11 will be of 2 marks. Okay, question 8. A diagnostic test for a certain disease is 90% accurate, meaning the probability of a person having the disease tested positive is 0.9, and the probability of a person not having the disease tested negative is 0.9. Okay, 50% of the population has the disease. Okay, what is the probability that a randomly chosen person has the disease given that the person tested negative? Okay, now to solve this problem, what I have done is, I have assumed that the total number of persons that were tested is 100. Okay, now see, now this is not the population. Okay, because usually you don't usually everyone doesn't go to the vaccination center, okay, or the test center. Okay, all right. So assuming that there were 100 persons who went for the diagnostic test, based on the data, 50% of the population has the disease. So we may now say that 50 have the disease and 50 don't have the disease. Okay, out of the 50 persons that we have. Okay, now due to the accuracy of the diagnostic test being 90%, we can say that in the group of those 50 people who have the disease, okay, 45 will test positive. Okay, due to the accuracy. Okay, 90% accurate means 45 out of 50 will test positive, and the remaining 5 will test negative. Okay, now let us go to the other group of people, 50 people who don't have the disease. Okay, fine. Again, due to the accuracy being 90%, out of these 50 persons, 45 will test negative. Okay, again 90% accuracy, and 5 will test positive. Now dealing with numbers, well, dealing with natural numbers is always better than dealing with fractions, okay, or probabilities. So that's why the number of persons, this choice is going to simplify our task. Okay, now let's go to the required probability. What is the probability that a randomly chosen person has the disease given that the person tested negative? Okay, so clearly this is a conditional probability. Okay, what is the condition? The person tested negative. Now how many people will test negative in the population of 100 persons? 5 and 45. Okay, so the total number of samples that we have with us is 5 plus 45, that is 50. Now out of these 50 people, we need to determine that number. Okay, all of them have the disease. Okay, randomly chosen person has the disease. Okay, so clearly those persons will be from these 5 people. Yes, so what is the required probability? Okay, total number in the denominator and a favorable number in the numerator. Okay, so 5 upon 50 is 1 upon 10 or 0.1. Now this being a numerical answer type question, and secondly it has the exact answer of 0.1, you have to type 0.1 in your on-screen keypad. Okay, so this is 0.1 answer to question 8, a probability question which is actually based on the Bayes theorem, but we have indirectly used it. So you may try applying the Bayes theorem and try to get the same answer that I have got. Okay, 0.1. Question 8 on probability. Let's go to question 9. Question number 9 is based on linear algebra. Let M be the matrix 1 1 0 1. Which of the following is correct? Rank of M is 1 and M is not diagonalizable. Rank of M is 2 and M is diagonalizable. 1 is the only eigenvalue and M is not diagonalizable, and 1 is the only eigenvalue and M is diagonalizable. Okay, now observe that our matrix M is upper triangular. Okay, because all the elements below the principal diagonal are 0. In fact, there is only one of them. And for such matrices, we know that eigenvalues are equal to the diagonal elements themselves. So for this matrix, there are 2 identical eigenvalues. Yes, okay. So the first part in options C and D is, excuse me. So the first part in option C and D is right. Okay, 1 is the only eigenvalue. Secondly, this is already in the form that we want, through which we can determine the rank. Okay, rank of M is 2. Okay, see, because no matter how hard you try, you cannot make this 1 0 without disturbing this. Okay, so the clear indication is rank of our matrix rho is 2. Okay, so A is definitely not right because the first part of it is wrong. So it is going to be either option B or one of the options from C or D, C and D. Okay, now let us try to get the eigenvectors, because we know that if eigenvalues are distinct, then it is always diagonalizable. If the eigenvalues are not distinct, like in this case, then it depends on the linear independence of eigenvectors. Okay, so let us try to get the eigenvector or eigenvectors associated with the eigenvalue, the only eigenvalue, that is 1. Okay, use the standard equation m minus lambda I times x equal to the null matrix. Okay, so if we subtract the eigenvalue from the diagonal elements, where we are going to get the matrix or matrix equation 0 1 0 0 xy equal to the 2 by 1 null matrix. Okay, fine. Now this is a homogeneous system possessing non-trivial solutions by design. Okay, so let's not worry too much about the second row, because that is what we expect if at all homogeneous system has non-trivial solutions. Okay, so what is the first one? 0x plus 1y equal to 0. See, this means y must be 0 and x can be anything. Okay, so all the eigenvectors of our matrix will be parallel to the x-axis. Okay, so the eigenvector, one of them is going to be 1 0. So clearly for our eigenvalue or for our eigenvalues 1 and 1, we cannot have linearly independent eigenvectors. Okay, so x1 and x2 aren't linearly independent, and because they are not linearly independent, M cannot be diagonalized. Okay, so the second part in option A is right, not diagonalizable, but because its rank isn't equal to 1, we have to reject A, so we have to select or consider option C. 1 is the only eigenvalue. Yes, we already had determined it. and M is not diagonalizable because of the linear dependence of the eigenvectors of M. Okay, so a pretty simple question based on three concepts. First, eigenvalues, second, rank, and third, diagonalization. Okay, question 9. Next is a question based on differential calculus of single variable functions, and you can actually solve it even if you were a 12th standard student. Let f of x be the function, polynomial function 2x cubed minus 3x squared plus 69, where the domain of the function is closed interval minus 5 to 5. Find the point at which f attains the global maximum. Okay, so the global maximum means there exists no other value of x in the domain for which f of x is greater than that particular value. Okay, it can be equal to that, but it can definitely not be greater than that. Okay, that is why the name global maximum. Okay, global means throughout its domain. Okay, now one thing for sure is, in addition to the interior points, okay, where we look for the local maximum, minimum, or local extreme values, we also need to worry about the values of the function taken at the endpoints. Okay, minus 5 and 5, and clearly f of minus 5 is less than f of 5 due to the odd power of, well, due to the odd degree. Okay, 3. So we need not worry too much about the value of the function at minus 5 because we are looking for global maximum. So let us determine f of 5. Okay, f of 5 will be 2 into 125 minus 3 into 25 plus 69. Yes, just substitute x equal to 5 in the definition. And if you calculate this, and you have to be very careful now, because if you are not good at such calculations, you have to use the on-screen calculator, which is going to take some time, okay, to produce the answer. But if you calculate it, it is going to be 244. So one contender for the global maximum is 244, but let's now look for local extreme values by applying the first and the second derivative tests. Okay, first derivative test is differentiate the function and equate it to 0, whatever the derivative is. Okay, so 2x cubed derivative 6x squared, 3x squared's derivative 6x, 69's derivative 0. Okay, equating this to 0 produces a quadratic equation, x squared minus x equal to 0, which has two roots, x equal to 1 and x equal to 0. Go to the second derivative now. 6x squared's derivative is 12x and x's derivative is 1, so 12x minus 6. Now add x equal to 0. Okay, the second derivative has a negative sign, so it has to be a local maximum. And at x equal to 1, okay, it is positive. Okay, 12 minus 6, so 6, so it has to be a local minimum at x equal to 1, but we are not interested in the minimum points now, okay, or minimum values. And how are we going to find f of 0 now? We can find it by substituting it in the definition of the function. So clearly f of 0 is going to be the constant term 69, and because 244 is greater than this local maximum value, we will select the associated x value with 244. Okay, see now if you input 244 as your answer, you are going to get 0 marks because they are not asking us the f value. Okay, they are asking us to find the x value, find the point at which f attains the global maximum. Okay, so at what point does f attain the global maximum? At x equal to 5, and the value is 244. Okay, so be careful. You may think that you have marked the correct option or typed the correct option or correct answer. You may be wrong. Okay, you may have solved the problem correctly, but if you unfortunately fail to recognize what has been asked, then you may not get 2 marks. Okay, see, if it were a theory question, then that would have been better. Okay, because the procedure also carries some credit, but not for any objective exam. Okay, so question 10, answer 5. Let's go to the last question now. Again, based on vector integral calculus, we have already had one of them, one from them in the based on the divergence theorem. Okay, question 11 based on line integrals, but we cannot apply Green's theorem here. Okay, because we don't have any closed curve. calculate the line integral of f bar dot dr bar along C1 minus the same along C2, where C1 is a curve defined parametrically as t comma d squared, and C2 is another curve defined by the parameterization t comma root t. Okay, so without any hesitation I can say that for the first one, x is t and y is t squared, y equal to x squared, y equal to x squared. Yes, and the second curve is x equal to y squared. Okay, because we usually write x first and then y. So if x is t and y is root t, clearly t is the square of root t, so x is the square of, okay, t varying from 0 to 1, and f bar is x, y, j cap. Okay, now you may quickly check whether the function is conservative, meaning whether the curl is 0, because if the curl is 0, it would mean that the value of the line integral is independent of the path chosen. Okay, and here we have two different paths. In that case, the value of this line integral, because it is independent of the path, okay, will be equal, so one minus the other will produce the answer 0. Okay, so if you find the curl of this function, it will turn out to be 0i plus 0j plus y k. See, this is definitely not a null vector for all values of y in the domain of the function. So definitely this is not a conservative field. Therefore we have to make use of the equations of the path that we have, or the definitions, parametric definitions, to evaluate both C1 and C2. Okay, now f bar only has the j component. Okay, so it is going to be xy dy. Okay, now let us go to the first curve C1. Okay, x is t, y is t squared, so dy will be 2t dt. Now let us go to C2. Okay, x is t, y is root t, so dy will be 1 upon 2 root t dt. Okay, this is very much like the integration by substitution. Everything else will get replaced by appropriate functions of t. For example, in the first one we have got x as t and y as t squared, and this is playing the role of dy now, as discussed here. Okay, that is for C1. For C2, x is t, okay, y is root t, yes, and this is now playing the role of dy, 1 upon 2 root t dt. Okay, root t will get cancelled, so the second integrand is t by 2. Limits are already given in the problem, 0 and 1. Okay, for the first one it is going to be, the integrand is going to be 2 times 4th power of t. Okay, so the value of the integral is going to be 2 times 1 upon 5. Okay, integral of t is t to the power 5 upon 5. Integral of t to the power 4, sorry, integral of t to the power 4 is t to the power 5 upon 5. And similarly for the second one, integrand is t divided by 2, so the integral is going to be 1 upon 2 into t squared by 2 as t goes from 0 to 1, so again 1 upon 2. So the final answer is 2 by 5 minus 1 upon 4, which is 3 by 20 or 0.15. Okay, now please write the exact value, or please type the exact value, because 3 upon 20 has a closing, or has a closed form, a closed decimal form. Okay, unlike any fraction which, let's say, has 3 in the denominator. Okay, so 0.15 is the answer, and you have to type this in the on screen keypad. Don't type 0.1499 or 0.1501 for fun. Okay, that may cost you 0 marks. Okay, or that, I should say, that will not fetch you 2 marks. Okay, because this is a numerical answer type question, so no negative marking, but let's play safe. Okay, so question 11, answer 0.15, a pretty simple question, but you have to do the calculations carefully. Okay, so this is the end of our discussion of engineering mathematics section of GATE XE 2016. Thank you.